retired U.S. Army Major General Michael Repass, who has worked as a trainer and a senior advisor to the Ukrainian Armed Forces since 2016. General, great to have you with us today. Thank you for being here. So let's get started with your reaction to what we've got so far from this readout. From the Chinese side and from the U.S. side, the Chinese saying that conflict and confrontation are not in anyone's interest. They don't want to see an escalation, in other words. What's your reaction to what we've heard so far, General?
What we've heard so far, what we've heard is that the Chinese are walking a very tight rope on sanctions, and they want to avoid being sanctioned by not only the United States, but the rest of the world. So this is a very big deal that they continue to walk this tightrope and pull this act. So I'm very concerned about where they're headed with this, and very concerned that they continue to side with the Russians on it. We have a lot at stake at this internationally, not only the United States, but the Western world and the economy.
Do you believe that China will give military support? There have been reports of, some sort of back discussions between Russia and China, and we all remember the statement that they put out saying that their friendship was unlimited right before the Olympics. How do you think China is viewing the sanctions that are on Russia right now and the world galvanizing response to what has happened in Ukraine?
Well, China is definitely taking note of all that. They have their eyes on Taiwan, and they know that whatever happens to Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine is probably coming their way should they actually move on Taiwan. So they're taking note on how this goes down. They're watching the processes. They're watching who's playing. And in the interim, they're going to start putting pressure on each one of these nations before they do anything in Taiwan. So they are getting their playbook together based on what is happening to Russia.
I think it's interesting. I don't see any discussion of biological or chemical weapons use and any discussion between the two. And maybe it was there and it's not in this readout. But there'll be questions about it, I would imagine, at the briefing when that gets underway, about a potential agreement or pressure that should be put on Russia not to use these kinds of weapons, or they could face consequences from both their new buddy in China and also from the rest of the world.
Yeah, so that is going to be a game changer if chemical or biological weapons are brought into the game here. Nobody's going to stand by and let that happen, let that go unpunished. There'll be serious repercussions from the international community on that, much worse than anything that has happened so far on the economic sanctions primarily. I don't think that the international community will stand by or sit on their hands and allow a chem bio incident to go down in Ukraine. It's just that's not acceptable on any level. China has to pay very close attention to what not only the United States, but the international community says these are red lines that we're not going to cross. But I agree with you. It's interesting that hasn't been a point so far.
Yeah, China has problems of their own right now. They have a big COVID outbreak. If we're to believe their numbers, it's probably the worst that they've had since the beginning because they did such an intense lockdown. But as we've seen, once you release that, eventually it finds its way around every population. They've also got financial problems that are very oppressive, real estate issues that they're dealing with. Do you think China's really in a position to say, yeah, we're gonna help you out, we're gonna send you weapons, we're gonna make sure you win this fight in Ukraine?
Boy, I tell you, you hit the nail on the head there, Martha. China has got their own problems. In the past decade or so, when they've done this mass urbanization where they moved the peasants off the arable land into these mega cities that they built, they actually built the cities on the little arable land that they have, and they're incapable of feeding themselves. So all their food has to be imported now. You throw that on top of the real estate and all the other factors that you've thrown in there, and a rational Chinese person would not believe that they want to anchor themselves to a sinking ship that is Russia. We're watching Russia go down as a player on the international stage. They're headed down a road that they cannot recover from. So China doesn't want to be
So
part
let me
of
ask
any
you
of that. Yeah.
about this language on Taiwan, because this is very interesting. Obviously, there's a parallel between China's ambition to bring Taiwan back into the fold, completely into the China fold, and what we see with Putin's desire to make Ukraine part of Russia once again. So this is from the White House side about what they said about Taiwan. It said the president reiterated the United States policy on Taiwan has not changed and emphasized that the United States continues to oppose any unilateral change in that status quo. Now, let's pull up what came from the Chinese side from one of their spokesmen on Twitter. This is what they said. President Biden reiterated that the United States does not seek to have a new Cold War with China, to change China's system, or to revitalize alliances against China, and that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence or seek a conflict with China. A little different.
Yeah, we're definitely apart as two nations there on that. That's going to be up to the diplomats and the senior leaders to work that one out. I can see the difference. I think everybody can see that. That is China incrementally edging into the discussion on Taiwan here. They're inching farther and farther towards their strategic objective of integrating Taiwan into their fold and making it part of mainland China there. So that's the language to support their view on that. It may not be the language that actually was discussed.
Major General Michael Repass, thank you very much, sir. Great to have you with us today. Hope you'll come back soon. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.